Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Breakthrough Live. I am one of your hosts, Rania Khalek, and today I'm joined by the wonderful, brilliant, amazing Zoe Alexandra, who is still, in Minnesota in the cold. Zoe, how's it going over there?
It's good. I haven't had any other wipeouts. I'm proud to report.
I'm very, very happy to hear that. We have a really great show for everybody today. But before we get to our topics, which are really just two main topics, we're going to be talking about more on the issue of ICE terror, Trump administration escalation in the streets of the U.S., and the growing outrage and protest against it. And then we're also going to be talking about the growing, or I guess the increasingly loud drums for war coming from the Trump administration against Iran. It seems that it's increasingly likely we're going to see something explode in, I don't know, the coming days. So we have some guests. We're going to be talking about what to expect on that front. But before we get into that, I want to remind all of our viewers and listeners that we are an independent media outlet that depends on support from our viewers. So if you are in our audience and you like what we do here at Breakthrough News and you appreciate truthful, honest reporting brought to you independently in a time where it's increasingly likely that whatever you're watching is controlled by a billionaire, then please consider going to patreon.com/breakthrough news and supporting us. For as little as $5 a month, you can access exclusive content as well as exclusive merch. And most importantly, you can be a part of an independent media outlet that, I think is indispensable at this point. We've been bringing you incredible coverage from our colleagues on the ground in Minnesota, including from Zoe Alexandra. And we're always on the ground wherever there's important stuff happening. So for us to be able to keep doing that, patreon.com/breakthrough news. And the easiest thing you can do to support us here at Breakthrough News is to smash that like button. Smash that like button. It helps. It helps boost us in the algorithm that hates us. Make sure you're subscribed to Breakthrough News on all your social media platforms. We're everywhere, you guys. And make sure if you're subscribed to us on YouTube, which why aren't you? You should be. Make sure that you hit the bell so you get notifications whenever we post new content, and make sure you hit all when you hit the bell so you get notifications for all our new content. Zoe, that was like a breathless introduction. Do you have anything you'd like to add before we get on to our first guest?
I think you covered it all. Support independent media. We're going to be out there braving the cold, the tear gas, the hot weather. We're the only ones who are going to bring you that story. And from the perspective,
Did you say the hot weather? Did you say the hot weather?
Well, we also brave the hot weather.
That's true. I just feel like.
Have you ever tried to carry like camera and equipment when it's like 35, 40 degrees Celsius? It's also difficult. We lose gallons of water for our coverage for our people.
No, that's true. That is very true. I just feel like you're talking about hot weather because it's like a wish since you're in Minnesota. And I feel so bad for you that you are out there braving the cold, but thank goodness that you are. And speaking of Minnesota, I want to go ahead and introduce our first guest. We are honored to have with us Aaron Reichlin-Melnick, a senior fellow at the American Immigration Council. Aaron, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, a lot has happened since we last had you on. The Trump administration and officials like Kristi Noem, as you know, even after everything we've seen in the last few weeks where ICE is now shooting and killing Americans in the streets, they keep insisting, I want to start here because I think it's important, they keep insisting that ICE is simply going after criminals. And, you're always sharing information about how that is not true. So what do the actual statistics show about who's being targeted in these raids? How many of these people swept up have actual serious criminal convictions versus minor offenses or no criminal record at all? And I raise that because this is like the main argument they keep making to justify what they're doing across the country.
Yeah, so I'll start with the big picture. And the big picture is that in these raids, it is increasingly common that the majority of arrests are people who have never had any criminal conviction at all, or even any arrest or criminal charge in their history. since really the Trump administration began these large-scale city raids back in Los Angeles in June, the majority of people that have been arrested at large in communities, so people arrested on the streets, at their homes, or at their workplaces, have been people with no criminal record. The most recent data we have on this is through October of 2025. And as of October, 2 out of every 3 people arrested at large had no criminal record. So that's not to say nobody arrested has some sort of connection to the criminal justice system, but the majority do not. Unfortunately, we don't have recent data on Minnesota and what's happened in Minneapolis, and probably will not be able to actually put data and facts into the mix to determine whether or not they're lying for several months now, because the data is coming to us through a very slow process of the Freedom of Information Act. But eventually, when we get the data, I'm pretty sure it's going to say the same thing it said for Los Angeles, Chicago, and DC. The idea that these raids are targeting, primarily people with criminal records is just made up.
Well, there's been new factors at play in this latest ICE deployment, CBP deployment to Minnesota that has outraged people even more. And I think we all know what I'm talking about, which is, of course, the assassinations, the killings of U.S. citizens, but also we've seen the detention of American citizens. We've seen, people being targeted by agents that are working under the Department of Homeland Security. From a legal and civil rights perspective, how alarming is this expansion of immigration enforcement into direct violence against U.S. citizens?
I think everything that is happening here is unprecedented. Of course, immigration enforcement has been going on for a century, but we have never seen anything like this before in American history, where we've got thousands of federal law enforcement officers deployed to cities in the interior to round up almost indiscriminately hundreds or thousands of people. And I think it's really crucial for people to understand that some of the explicit targets in Minneapolis were people here lawfully. One of the main things that federal agents were in Minneapolis to do was this thing called Operation Paris, Parris, which was about arresting and detaining lawfully present refugees, people who had been vetted and screened years ago and came to the United States legally on pathways to green cards and eventual citizenship, and then detaining those people, sending them to Texas to be interrogated about their status. And then oftentimes when the interrogation resulted in federal officials realizing the person had done nothing wrong and in fact was a lawful refugee, just dumping the person on the streets of Texas and telling them, you find your way back to Minnesota. So we have really, a recipe for clashes between communities and federal law enforcement officers when this kind of thing is happening, because of how unprecedented it is, and because it really shocks people's conscience to see their neighbors rounded up, arrested without warrants, thrown into vans, and spirited off to the airport 90 minutes later to be flown out of the state. And that's exactly what's happening and what led to these clashes and unrest, which have ultimately resulted in the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
I want to ask you, because I think that this is, maybe a year ago, people would have thought you're being dramatic if somebody said this. But, when you step back and look at these patterns that we're witnessing, you see mass raids, the repression of protest, detentions of U.S. citizens, of course, in addition to many non-U.S. citizens, the use of lethal force in the streets. Does ICE still function as what you could call a conventional immigration agency, or is it increasingly being used as a political instrument to target communities and movements that maybe don't fit Trump's ideological agenda? You see people, and I do this sometimes too, throwing around terms like, this is Trump's militia. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say yes and no. I mean, no, in that, yes, in that ICE is still carrying out nationwide a lot of the kinds of stuff that it has done for many years. And I think it's crucial to understand, as whenever the focus is on the media is just on a singular city like Minneapolis, ICE is still in every city around the country, and people are still being arrested and detained around the country in immigration courts in ways that the Trump administration has, started up in June of last year. And they have new officers coming on board every week now as part of the mass hiring binge that are engaged in some of the more traditional kinds of ICE tasks, like going to local jails and picking people up that have been turned over by local police and then taking them to detention for processing. All of that continues on as normal. But what is new is the way in which the administration is deploying not just ICE, but DHS forces in general, including the Border Patrol, Customs and Border Protection officers, and a bunch of officers from around the federal government as part of these large surges to very clearly blue cities with governments that oppose the president's policy priorities. And I think you look at exactly what Trump described the Minnesota operation as, retribution, and you see the ways in which, yes, the federal government is being used to carry out these punishments. But at the same time, it's not like they are there with not, doing nothing under federal law. There are the machine continues operating even when it isn't being used in this very targeted, retribution focused way.
Well, it's really interesting, Aaron, because, today there's been news coming out that, in fact, the sort of switch up between Tom Homan and Greg Bovino may result in also the withdrawal of some ICE and CBP officers from Minnesota, which the Democrats seem to be hailing as a victory. They seem to be caving on some of their demands from the Republicans. No surprise there, trying to avoid a government shutdown. But I think really the sentiment on the streets, it would seem, and amongst communities, is that is not really justice at all. And so I'm just wondering, if you can talk a little bit about what is accountability and what does justice look like in the aftermath and in the midst of this massive operation that's happening, again, as you mentioned, not only in this moment of Metro surge in Minneapolis and Minnesota, but nationally. And what tools, legal, congressional, or grassroots, are being used, could be used to actually restrain and dismantle this kind of enforcement apparatus?
Yeah, well, I think number one ask for justice and accountability is formal investigations into the officers who killed Alex Preddy and Renee Good. They cannot sweep this under the table as they've attempted to do. It took 4 days for them to even say that they were putting the officers who killed Alex Preddy on administrative leave. And there's still no evidence that the officer who killed Renee Good was ever put on administrative leave. In fact, was allowed to leave the state and go back to his normal duties within just a couple of days after it had happened. A same situation would happen with Marimar Martinez in Chicago. So we need real investigations into these situations where people are being shot, not just political, whitewashing going on by the administration. But beyond that, we really do have to talk about actual ways to rein in the agency. And a big one will be eventually cutting the funding that ICE got in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. That law provided ICE with $75 billion, $45 billion to be used for immigration detention. To give you some sense of how much money that is, averaging it with ICE's normal budget, it's about $15 billion a year for the next 4 years. The entire Federal Bureau of Prisons budget is less than $9 billion. So we're talking nearly twice the budget of the entire federal prison system that ICE is going to have over the next 4 years. And they also got $30 billion for hiring and other enforcement operations. All of that money can and should be clawed back because we do not need a system that is that massive. We also need to have better external accountability, ensuring that members of Congress actually are able to exercise their right to go into detention centers and demand accountability and see, what's going on there. And we also need the restoration of and bigger teeth for the internal government watchdogs that have been gutted by this administration. And then finally, I want to talk about changes to the legal justice system and courts, because many people don't know it's extremely difficult to sue federal law enforcement officers and hold them accountable. You cannot just sue cops the way you can sue a state and local law enforcement officer if they are federal officers. And so we need real accountability for federal law enforcement officers who violate civil rights, and the ability of federal judges to step in and make meaningful orders to restrain unlawful immigration enforcement operations.
You know, Aaron, something that you often bring up is something that gets, I think, drowned out by all of the Customs and Border Patrol and ICE violence that we're seeing in the streets, and that is the conditions that immigrants are facing who have been detained. That are just the reports of increasingly horrific abuses and conditions. So I'm curious if you can kind of give us an update of what we know has been going on in immigration detention over the last few months.
So we just put out a big new report 2 weeks ago on the expansion of immigration detention in Trump's first term that you can check out on our website, AmericanImmigrationCouncil.org. And what we document is that the ICE detention system, fueled with this new wash of cash from Congress, has expanded more than 80% since Trump took office, from 40,000 people in detention on any given day at the start of his term to now more than 73,000 people in detention as of a week or two ago. And that detention expansion has been so quick that the system has become overwhelmed. The conditions were always bad in ICE detention. There's always been abuses, same as there are in the entire, carceral system. But those abuses are getting worse because they are rushing people into the system faster than they can hire up officers to staff it and make sure there's enough medical care, or even ensure that people have beds to sleep in. We've had appalling situations where people have been arrested so fast that they're held in holding cells at local ICE field offices for days at a time, sleeping on concrete floors, not getting enough food, not being provided access to medical care. And the end result is deadly. 30 people died in ICE custody in 2025, and 6 people have already died in custody in 2026. Of those, 3 of those were people who died because of medical issues. Several of their families say that those issues were longstanding chronic conditions that were not properly addressed, leading to people having, medical crises. 2 of those were suicides. And that's a sign that the system is not protecting people. And one of them was the first ever homicide of someone held in ICE detention. This was at a tent camp, slapdash, ramshackle tent camp built in El Paso on a military base where they're already holding more than 3,000 people, the largest ICE detention center in history, and where 3 people have already died since it started up in August. That is a sign of the system fully breaking down.
I mean, it's horrifying what you described, and it's definitely necessary to keep our eyes on both of those elements. And just before we let you go, Aaron, you are a trove of this information, and I really encourage people to check out those reports online. But as you said, there's things going on multiple fronts. We have the deployment of ICE and CBP to the cities. We have these horrific conditions in these detention camps, and at the same time, people's legal status is being undermined. And so programs that have existed for decades, TPS, are being ended dramatically. Communities that have enjoyed some sort of regular status are now essentially becoming targets. We know that Trump has threatened the Haitian community in Ohio. Could you talk a little bit about these attacks on TPS and what it means?
Yeah, and I think the big picture there that people really should process is that in Trump's first year, he stripped legal status from more people than he deported. So more people were rendered vulnerable to deportation and undocumented than were actually deported. And so arguably the undocumented population may have gone up last year because of that, although the term undocumented has a lot of different meanings, and some people would say people with TPS were undocumented. So setting that aside, the key picture here is more people were rendered vulnerable. And as of February 4th, 350,000 Haitians are at risk of losing their temporary protected status unless a federal court steps in. That is a shocking moment because these are people who have been here for, at this point, anywhere from 3 to 5 or even to 10 or 15 years. There's 50,000 of those people who've been here since the earthquake in 2010, who have had temporary protected status, have been checking in with the government every 18 months for the last 15 years. And now they might be, tossed out on the streets and told, we're going to come and round you up. But all of that also goes along with cuts to legal immigration. We've seen the Trump administration impose the strictest and harshest nationality-based restrictions on immigration in the modern era since the 1924 racist national origin quota systems. 39 countries now cannot get immigrant visas to the United States, plus the Palestinian Authority. And nationals of those countries who are in the United States right now, who are applying for benefits since mid-December, have been unable to get their benefits adjudicated. So now you have this horrifying situation where you have people essentially potentially falling into limbo or losing their status because the government refuses to adjudicate their application. All of that is adding more chaos to the system and really making the United States even more immigrant unfriendly, and I think is undermining immigrant communities around the country.
Well, Aaron Reichlin-Melnic, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You are such a wealth of information on all of this. Please keep doing the amazing work you're doing, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that was really informative and really upsetting, just all of that, everything that, because this is people's lives being ruined in such an extreme way. But I am going to just go ahead and move on to our next guest because she tends to fire us all up. I want to welcome to the show Linda Sarsour, author, racial justice and civil rights activist, and community organizer. Linda, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we are seeing a nationwide surge of protests right now against ICE, as you know. And I wanted to ask you, because you're a community organizer, you're always active on the ground, always for equality and justice in a moment like this as well, and many others. How is this moment, though, do you think different from past waves of resistance? Because it does feel like something in the country has shifted politically.
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to say I salute the people of Minnesota. I mean, Donald Trump messed with the wrong city. I've organized in Minneapolis before. I was on the ground during the horrific murder of George Floyd back in 2020 and just saw this type of bravery, this type of community that the Minneapolis community has built for themselves, this idea of supporting one another, standing in the gap for one another. This is what Minneapolis organizers, the Minneapolis community is known for. And I think one of the things I think that's really important here is that you have a white woman, Renee Nicole Good, may she rest in power, and also Alex Pretty, also a white man, get killed by ICE. And it just demonstrates to the rest of the country and to our communities, to marginalized people, and to our allies and to our neighbors that no one is immune to this. Any one of us can be shot. And if two white allies of ours, accomplices of ours, can be shot with impunity and killed by ICE, that means, for the rest of us, it just means that more terror can come. And I think this is the moment for the country to stand up and say, enough is enough. This stops here. And I think the reason why many are standing up across the country is we're sending a message. For example, in New York City, hands off New York. We want to stand up in New York City, not only in solidarity with Minneapolis, but to say you are not welcomed here. ICE is not welcome to terrorize New York City in the ways that we've seen it do in other parts of the country. Not to say that ICE has not deported people, that ICE has not separated families at 26 Federal Plaza, because they have. But we have not seen the type of ICE operations in New York that we've seen in other parts of the country.
Well, Linda, I mean, I have to echo Rania's praise because you are such an important voice in this moment. And I saw you out in the streets in New York City. I saw videos of it. Powerful calls to keep mobilizing and keep organizing. Can you talk a little bit about this new wave of, the national strike, general strike, shutdowns? It seems like this is an idea whose time has come in a lot of ways. We've seen this call shared not only by activists like yourself and organizations and groups, but by, pretty big time celebrities. I saw Ariana Grande actually shared a graphic today calling on people to not go to school, not go to work, and not shop on Friday. Talk a little bit about this call. What does it mean for working people in the United States to actually use this tactic, and why do you think it's so important right now?
You know, it's interesting when we talk about strikes in the US, the American people are very exceptional in this conversation. I always say to people, when you watch strikes, general strikes in any part of the world that have ever happened, most of them very successful, it has always been led by the poor and working class. You've never seen rich people in other parts of the world be like, let's all do a strike together. And so I say to the American people, I understand that people feel the need that they have to go to work, that they have to do certain things, but at some moment we have to sacrifice. At some moment, we have to say what is happening is not normal, that we are willing for one day to not shop at these major corporations who are aiding and abetting this administration. We have to be able to do the small things. We each have individual power. Yes, we should not go to school. These universities, oftentimes, much of their revenue comes from our participation in those systems, right? When it comes to the places that we work, particularly those who work in major corporations. And I understand that there's a risk involved. No one's saying that being part of a general strike does not require risk. But at some moment, we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to do in this moment? What are you willing to give up in this moment? Because if we do not sacrifice, if we do not give up something that we have, then this is just going to get worse than it already is. So I'm calling on the American people to join and do the small things. Like, we could all be supporting small mom and pop shops in our community, small businesses who are struggling in this economy. We don't have to go to Target. You don't have to go to Home Depot. You don't have to go shopping on Amazon. That's just things that are actually privileges that we don't have to engage in, and join in that way. If you're a student, don't go to school that day. If you are able to not go to work, call out sick. Many people got sick days. Use your sick days. It's a good cause, because at some point, it's not enough for just the organizers to be outside or just to have the same kind of group of people cycle in and out of the movement. We need our neighbors. We need you to understand that we are setting a dangerous precedent in this country if our regular citizens in this country, our neighbors, our moms and dads, our cousins, our colleagues, are not also participating in what we're doing. And never underestimate your body. When I go out to a rally, I say to people all the time as an organizer, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals mass mobilization. So no, don't ever say, oh, me, they won't miss me. No one's going to notice that I'm not there. I will notice, because your body means something when you are outside saying that I am bearing witness to a moment that is not normal, and I'm going to use my voice right now.
You know, Linda, the Trump administration is clearly rattled by the unpopularity of these policies and people demonstrating against them across the country. And as a result, they are escalating the repression, even if they're kind of pretending like they're, retreating a bit. And I know, I just want to ask you, historically, when the state responds this way, that sort of escalation of repression, what does that tell us about the effectiveness of being a part of a movement and of being in the streets?
Absolutely. I think people need to not take the message the opposite way. When the administration is scrambling, when we see these things escalate, it means that what we're doing means something. It means that the administration is trying to figure out, do we go harder right now? Because there is a lot of turmoil happening right now within the Trump administration. Many of you have seen high-level officials in the DHS who have been moved out of their positions because of this moment that we're in, because of the calls of the people on the street and outside. And when we see this administration engaging in more repression, but also retreating, in my opinion, right? Saying things like there will be an investigation into Alex Pretty's, murder, right? Things like that they were not saying before. In fact, before, they were defending it right out, saying that we are going to defend all ICE officers in whatever actions that they take. So we're starting to see some response. We're seeing the breakdown within the administration. So that just tells me keep going. Keep staying loud, stay consistent. Don't let this be a one-day thing. No one has ever won change by going outside for one day or for 2 days or for a week. We know this from history just in this country, a Montgomery bus boycott that almost lasted for an entire year, right, before things changed. So I just want people to know that in this moment, we need the consistency and the persistency. Our communities are worth this fight. This administration has no idea what they have basically awoken in this country. Even people that I don't agree with are are on the internet being like, this is not okay. Once you start seeing people who don't usually agree with you, start being like, that wasn't okay. We watched the video. For example, Alex Purdy was a gun owner, a licensed gun owner. The conservative right has to get it together. Either people are allowed to carry guns with licenses or they're not. The Second Amendment applies to everyone or it doesn't. So we're also starting to see the hypocrisy of it. We're starting to see the real intention that we all knew all along. So again, this is a moment where we're watching things break down, the narrative that they tried to put out there to say, this is what the law is supposed to do. This is what law and order looks like. This is what the Second Amendment is for. It's all breaking down. And we're going to see some dark moments in this country, but we're also going to be here to see the light that comes after.
Well, Linda, interestingly, we've seen announcements this week, I think very much to what you're speaking about, of seemingly the Trump administration kind of scrambling. Okay, we're going to remove Gregory Bovino. We're going to put in Tom Homan. Now we might remove some ICE officials. And it would seem that the Democrats are having backdoor negotiations with them. There have been announcements about how this will impact the budget vote. So, in your perspective, are the Democrats doing enough right now? And what is your take on these deals that they apparently are making? Because Waltz said, I don't remember the exact quote now, but I think he said, well, let's wait and see. Tom Homan seems to be like a person who knows right from wrong, and he seems to be someone who's a good law enforcement official. And well, there's some choice quotes from Tom Homan that suggest otherwise. So what's your take on the Democrats' response to this?
Sounds like the good people on both sides argument that we've heard before. What comes to mind when I think of Tom Homan is this incredible video of Mayor Zohran Mamdani getting into a shouting match with Tom Homan in New York when he came here as the borders are. This is the problem with Democrats. In fact, I was at a rally the other day where a guy came up to me and said, great speech. I like what you said, but why do you always have to criticize the Democrats? And I said, that's exactly my job. As a New Yorker, I am a registered Democrat. So it is literally my whole responsibility to hold elected leaders accountable, in particular, the party that claims to care about immigrants and migrants. Senator Chuck Schumer came out and said, I'm going to vote no against the DHS funding bill. He only did that because he saw the writing on the wall. He sees the calls from our communities and the movement. And I say to Chuck Schumer, it is not about just what you're going to do. It's about you're the leader. A leader is supposed to get other people to follow them. So we should be expecting that the entire Democratic conference in the United States Senate vote no against this DHS bill. I am sick and tired of the strongly worded letters. I'm sick and tired of people telling me that we can train fascism away in a rogue, militarized agency. The American people are not gullible people. We are intelligent people. We can think for ourselves. We have agencies where we watch videos of people get murdered. We watched it from multiple angles, and they want to deny me with what my eyes see. In the past, you can kill people without video, and you can sell the American people whatever you want, but not in this day and age. I know what I saw when Alex Purdy got murdered. I know what I saw when Renee Good got murdered. And it is unfortunate that we did not see a video of when Keith Porter was murdered. But you know what? I can gather from patterns of behavior that it was probably something brutal and probably unjust and illegal. So I'm just saying that the Democrats are people with a lot of words and very little action. And we, the American people, aren't standing for it. I think 2026 midterm elections are going to be really exciting in the sense that people are going to hopefully support people who are not just about, we're going to hold ICE accountable. We need to abolish ICE. We do not need ICE. And that's the kind, if I don't, anything less than abolish ICE, you are not fit to serve in office in this country.
Well, on that note, I want to ask you, Linda, for people who are watching, who want to act, who want to be involved, but feel overwhelmed or perhaps afraid, considering what we've seen on video of ICE doing to protesters, what concrete steps do you recommend people should be taking right now?
Absolutely. There's a website called standwithminnesota.com. It's a crowdsourced by people in our movement around how do you support people to ensure that they're getting groceries, people who are not working right now because they're afraid to go outside because they're undocumented and are worried about getting picked up by ICE. So organizations who are on the front lines, and for those of you who are anywhere near New York City, follow Hands Off New York City, NYC. That's a group of people and coalition of organizations that have been organizing here on the ground, supporting families who are going into 26 Federal Plaza for these immigration appointments, doing on the ground organizing. On Friday, we will be outside at 4 o'clock in Foley Square during this general strike that has been called by our colleagues in Minnesota. Go outside. There are mobilizations in your cities. Take your body, take your friend, take your colleagues if you are able, and just be outside. This is a moment we're going to look back at 30, 40 years from now, and you want to be able to say to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, you don't have to ask me where I was, because I was all the way outside. I was not silent. I did not sit idly by in this moment, because we are in a generation right now where we have people who have literally shed blood and tears for us to be in this position that we are in today. I feel very privileged based on the sacrifices of the people that came before me. And the real question to our generation right now is, what are you willing to sacrifice? What narrative are you willing to shift in this moment? What things are you willing to fight for in this moment for future generations to come? So this is our moment. This is not, let's look back and say what we would have done if we were outside in the 1960s. This is not what we would have done if we were during this revolution in this country. Right now, here in the United States of America, what are you willing to do? And I'm saying, go outside, donate to grassroots organizations, use your social media for good. Blast misinformation when you see people posting misinformation about an Alex Preddy or saying this is what the government said. And I always say, and I want to leave this with viewers here, there was this incredible quote that I take with me from Ida B. Wells, who was an investigative Black journalist from the Civil Rights Movement. And Ida B. Wells said, "Those who commit the murders write the reports." So never tell me this is what the police report said. Never tell me this is what the president of the United States said happened or what a DHS official happened. We have to remember that those people in power will murder civilians and then they will try to tell you the story. And we've seen this before. We've seen this movie before, even if we wanted to compare it to what happens in Palestine when journalists are literally assassinated, nurses and doctors are assassinated. And then the narrative is that those people are terrorists, that they were a threat to society. And we see that same narrative over here against people like Renee, against people like Keith Porter, against people like Alex. And we say, no, we are not, whatever they're selling, we are not buying. And I hope you keep that Ida B. Wells quote to you.
Well, Linda Sarsour, civil rights activist, community organizer, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Zoe, you heard it. Get out in the streets, folks. Go do something. I know it looks scary, but yeah, I mean, it does. It looks, in moments like this, it does seem like it's scary. But, you know, Zoe, you're out there in the cold and the tear gas and you're okay. So if Zoe can do it, you can do it. I have an excuse. I'm outside of the country. So sorry, guys. I'm holding on the fort in Lebanon. We've got somebody all over the world. I'm your Middle East person, so I'm watching from here to make sure everyone's okay. Zoe, we have a great guest next. I'm just going to go ahead and jump into it. Very excited to introduce to the show comedian Tim Heidecker. Tim, it is a pleasure to have you on.
Hi, thank you so much. Nice to have been asked.
Are we like, you're out? You look like you're outdoors right now. Are you protesting ICE?
No, I'm about to do my own show, the Office Hours Live. I was going to give you guys a little sneak peek into another competing broadcast.
Oh, look at that. Hello.
Yeah, look, we got a band coming up this morning called, can I curse on this show?
I mean, you do you.
Okay, well, I would normally, Vic, can you hold this for a second? I'm doing some press right now. This is a band called, and I'm not kidding about this, it's an Australian band called Tropical Fuck Storm.
Easy.
That's what they're called. I'm not trying to do a bit. You can look them up.
All right.
They're from Australia.
Hey, that
definitely
gets noticed. That definitely gets
we
noticed.
Also have an
we
have an interesting guest coming on the show today. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Oh wow. Who is that? I've never seen this person.
I guess she's got a new movie coming out. It's supposed to be pretty good.
Very cool. I can't wait to hear all about her new movie. Tim, we all know you, right? You're a very funny comedian.
I don't know.
I love your opening is already great. But I also love that you take what's happening in the country so seriously.
Yes.
And you posted about this coming Friday's general strike against ICE terror. So I'm just curious, what have you been thinking, watching as you watch everything unfold in Minneapolis?
Well, it's horrible. It's traumatic and upsetting, and we're all trying to figure out what the hell to do, what we can do, what the people can do. Obviously, the people of Minneapolis have already done so much. Some of I mean, a little bit of it feels like, moving Bovino out and all this stuff doesn't feel substantive yet, but the pressure is growing, and it's all coming from the people on the streets. So I'm inspired by that, and I think any call for a general strike is been long overdue. And I mean, I've been in favor of the marches and protests, but I always said from the beginning that doing it on Saturdays doesn't really count. Like, we need to start disrupting in a more disruptive way, and that if we could send a message to Wall Street or Main Street with like our purchasing power, the dollars we spend, then and we can do it in a coordinated way. That can become very effective. I mean, I think it's not a big ask for anybody that feels uncomfortable with the direction that this administration is taking the country to opt out of, going down to Target, going to Whole Foods, going down to, the Home Depot, whatever it is. Like, if it's not a big deal for us to do it, but it's a major deal if everybody does it, right, Vic?
You couldn't say truer words. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Vic.
I mean,
Vic doesn't agree with me on this issue. He wants to go to Target on Friday and buy Super Mario Brothers plushie toys, he told me.
Oh, God.
And
Is
bobbleheads.
Vic a fascist? Is Vic a fascist?
Yeah, he is actually.
No, I'm very fashionable. No.
He's got a Three Stooges
I got
book.
a Three Stooges books, yes.
But anyways.
Yeah, I got dollies here.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a big deal to do it, but if everybody does it, that's the thing. Everybody does it. Then maybe it. Well, I think it already scared, the Best Buy and the Target people. They all came out and were like, and then you see it actually work, where Trump and Homan and all these clowns are like, well, maybe we're gonna, start moving people out. So it's like, they're such cowards. Like, but we just have to be organized and spread the message. And also, by the way, don't use the social media tomorrow, except maybe to push this. But let those, because all these people, all they do is look at numbers. And so if you show them this dip, let's create a dip. Also, I look insane in this angle that I've created for myself here. But anyways, let's do the dip. How about this? Let's make the dip. Let's make the dip. Let's do the dip tomorrow, Friday.
So, Tim, I think you'd be interested to know there's dozens and dozens of high schools and thousands of high school students that have actually pledged to walk out tomorrow. Extremely inspiring. Yes. In Atlanta, Georgia, a student was actually threatened with suspension because of his organizing as part of this mass wave of student walkouts. I mean, I think this is something that everyone needs to be paying attention to. And, on that point, you, as Rania said, you have been quite outspoken when a lot of people have stayed silent. Yes. You're not only speaking out right now about ICE, but you spoke out on Gaza. You are a member, if I'm correct, of DSA.
I'm not a member, but just because I'm too unorganized in my life, I don't have I'm not that. You know what? I don't have all my papers. I don't even have my citizenship papers, and I was born here and have a passport. I don't know if there's a separate piece of paper.
Do we have papers? Kidding. Wait, are we supposed to have? I was like,
well, that's the one thing I agree with ICE on. I think we should have to carry papers around. I don't mind that aspect of it. I think we should all have various documents and reams of paperwork that we have to show the local police.
That sounds like a.
But yeah, I don't know. Me and Billie Eilish. We're the only two speaking out about this, and I love Billie, and perhaps maybe Billie and I will make some music together. We don't know.
I mean, but why do you think that people avoid talking about this? Like, what is the climate of fear that, captures people? I mean, we're seeing high school students risk suspension, risk, their studies, university students, members of the Somali community Why is it that entertainers and public figures
Do you
seem
know
to-
how do you know how shallow and insecure and generally stupid you have to be to end up in the entertainment industry? That accounts for 90% of the people I, in my field. So of course they're not going to jump to the front of the line. I'm just kidding. I love all my actors, right, Doug? Doug's one of the great actors.
I love actors. They are. What do you? Huh?
But he doesn't know what we're even talking. He doesn't even know what we're talking about. He's listening to old Run DMC records.
He's like, what's
But
ice?
anyway, yeah. You want some more ice in your drink? That's what he wants to know. But we
well,
hope
on that
we hope
note,
ICE disbands. We can't do ICE anymore. We have to let them. We have to send them home, restructure it. Who knows? I mean, we got to close it all down. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
A lot of people say fuck ice, but I disagree because it's more of like fuck snow, marry water, kill ice.
All right, now we don't like that.
Ooh, oh no, ice always
Oh,
melts.
that's the
What
new.
I say.
That's the new ICE uniform.
Uh-huh.
Is it really?
Ice
Yeah,
Oh,
this is
wow.
what a lot of them are wearing
That
now.
looks like some
All
like,
right.
weird bondage stuff.
Look, this has
Did you
been a
expect
great
this
chat
to be-
with you because we're warming up for a great episode of Office
Yeah.
Hours, which we do in my garage here.
No, we really, really appreciate your time and are excited to get to talk to you. And I guess just one thing I want to ask you before you go real quick is for people who maybe don't see themselves as activists but do have platforms, who aren't as
Yeah.
shallow as many of the people around you, the creatives, the performers, the influencers who maybe have a conscience. What responsibility do they have right now? Tell them to go speak out. Give them like your
I
pitch
think,
real quick.
come on in. The water's fine. It's fine. I mean, I could tell you, like, the people I respect and like in this comedy world of mine, Tim Robinson has been very vocal. Hannah Einbinder has been very vocal. I'm sure there's others I can't. Zach Woods, who I love and is one of my great loves. He's been very vocal. Like, so people are out there. Patton Oswalt's always talking the good talk. So just come on in. It's fine. Like, unless you disagree with all this stuff, and in which case you're a nut job like Rob Schneider or somebody that we don't want to be around, whose wife just left
Nicki
him, by the way.
Minaj.
Nicki Minaj. Yeah, I don't want to know those people. But yes, if it's a great, no one's going to cancel you. You're not going to be blacklisted. So just come on in, and we're all just, if you have, I always just think if you have more than 2 followers on any of these corrupt, disgusting social media platforms, why not use it to push out, positive things like trying to, get these Gestapo troops out of Minneapolis and whatnot. So it's easy.
Right on. Right
And I
on.
get paid by
Well,
the Soros Foundation sends me a stipend of $2,500 a month, which has been nice.
That's it? That's it?
That's all you're getting?
Yeah, that's it.
Wow,
I
he's
know. I
paying
got to
you low.
renegotiate. That's from
You're
2016, that
underpaid.
contract.
Well,
Well,
Tim,
it's nice to
such a
talk to you
pleasure
too,
chatting
and,
with you. Enjoy your good luck on your show.
I'll
We look
call in
forward
every
to
week,
watching
okay?
you. Yeah, we'll
Sounds
see you
good.
next week. Bye, Tim. Thanks
Okay,
so
anybody-
much.
I
Oh, we
appreciate
cut him off.
having
But, oh, there we go.
some competition. All right, bye.
Yeah. Bye. That was like so trippy. I love like the camera just moving around.
Just
Great
moving
guy, though.
around.
Great guy. Like, I really appreciate like people like that, like can just kind of, they don't have to do this. Like they can just live comfortably. And so it's like nice
Right.
when you have ones who are like, who have like a conscience and like actually care. And he has for a really long time. He's been like really politically good for a very long time, politically solid guy. So thanks, Tim, for joining us. And now, Zoe, we have a little bit of time where we're going to basically kind of shift gears here. That was a lot of
Right.
ice. Let's like, let's summarize what do we want the message
Reset.
to be from the guests we just had?
I mean, it feels like there's a strong call from a lot of those guests, that the mobilization and the struggle is continuing, and people seem really fired up. And I think that what Linda said is that this is kind of a turning point. The unity that's being expressed on the streets does seem qualitatively different. I think, and it isn't disconnected from what's happening internationally. I think across the board, people are waking up to things in a new way. Palestine had a lot to do with this. The Trump administration's first year attacks on literally everyone has had a lot to do with this. But I think we are in a new stage in the United States, and of course, new stage of the United States impacting the entire world. So that's my big takeaway, Rania.
Yeah, I mean it's also just like this year's been crazy. Like I just can't believe it's the end of January, but there's still a couple days left in it. And 2026 has already felt like several years in one. I mean, around the world. And also like a lot of really dark things have happened, but like I have to say it's very exciting to me that so many people across the US are like expressing their basically discontent right now with what's happening, because otherwise it's even more depressing. Like it's like people have to push back, people have to fight back. And at the end of the day, like it's really depressing whether you look at Venezuela, whether you look at Iran, or whether the coming war on Iran, which we're about to talk about with our next two guests. But like when you see street executions in the US, I mean, this is quite unprecedented. I know that we've seen like police violence and those kinds of things happening, but to have this immigration enforcement agency being so politicized and used by one party, run by this like delusional crazy man, surrounded by a bunch of psychos like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth. Like there's always these four guys behind him. It's like really like, I'm just going to say small hand energy. It's small dick energy. I don't care. Whatever. It's 2026. If the president concurs, so can I. But like it is, it's like small dick energy from these man babies. It's always Donald Trump. There they are. Thank you, John. There you have JD Vance's baby face. And Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, like that. They're just psychos. Like they're a bunch of psychos. These are like the frat guys who got into the frat because their dads were already in it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the nepotism frat guys is what they represent to me, who just have like small man parts and are taking down the whole world. And I'm not trying to simplify it. Obviously, there's an ideology behind it. But these guys, like there's like an extra level of just disgustingness. It's like just watching a pathetic bully who has more money and a better weapon, just crap on everybody around them and get away with it. But, I don't think these guys are going to get away with it for very long. Like, I just don't. Yeah. I actually think that, a time will come when they don't get to walk around like with a nuke behind them.
Because that's what it is. At the end of the day, it's because they are currently in charge of the world's most lethal military force in the world, and the biggest, the most well-funded. And it just, I saw part of Earth's Greatest Enemy this week, and it just really kind of reaffirmed this underlying truth that the US, with its military industrial complex, is the biggest threat to people across the world, people at home and people, of course, and not only the global south, but across the entire world. And like, there actually can be no justice in the world as long as the United States continues to have a $1 trillion military budget, 800 bases across the entire world, and just doing gunboat diplomacy. It's not even, we can't even call it diplomacy anymore. They're just threatening countries with war every single day. So
yeah. And we're gonna, like, on that note, we are gonna move to the insane escalation against Iran. It's like now it's we've kind of been waiting the last couple of weeks for this U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Lincoln, to make its way to the Middle East from the South China Sea, I believe is where it was. And now that it's basically like entered into the Gulf region, Trump has been escalating his threats rhetorically, in addition to all of the military hardware he's moved to essentially surround Iran. And actually now, just a few hours ago, you had it reported that Russia is preparing to evacuate its staff from one of Iran's power plants or energy plants. You've got a lot of airlines canceling flights to the Gulf states. All of the sort of signs and patterns that you would see ahead of some sort of massive strike are what we're seeing right now. And you have the Americans and the Israelis saying it. So on that note, I want to go ahead and introduce our next guest, Mouin Rabbani, a non-resident fellow at the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. Mouin, it is a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on your program again, Rania. Very good to see you.
Thank you. It's great to see
And
you,
hello,
but
Zoe. Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, the circumstances for our meetings are never very good.
Unfortunately.
Here, in the past, we've been talking a lot about other regional developments constantly around the issue of Gaza genocide and war. And now here we are at the precipice of yet another massive escalation against Iran. We're all kind of waiting to see what that's going to look like. And we can get to that aspect of this, but I want to touch first on a recent piece you wrote called How to Promote War. And I think it's important to discuss this because over the last few weeks, you've seen the sort of laying of the foundation for trying to justify a certain kind of war on Iran. And you lay out the sort of familiar media playbook used to manufacture consent for a war like this with the selective outrage and the sort of emotional framing and the marginalizing of dissent. And so I wanted to ask you, are we seeing that exact script being rolled out with Iran right now? And what are the clearest warning signs that a war narrative is being actively engineered?
Well, to a large extent, yes. Let me just start by saying I'm not Iranian. I've never been to Iran. I don't speak Farsi, and I'm not an Iran specialist. But I have for decades worked professionally both in Middle East analysis and human rights reporting. And it seems to me that a war is both inevitable and probably imminent. The only question is whether the US and Israel will strike first or whether they will seek to increase the pressure upon Iran to such an extent that Iran strikes first. But I suspect we'll find out sooner rather than later. The playbook here, and I'll maybe refer to my piece. I think it's quite clear that during the recent unrest, that government security forces killed several thousand Iranians, and I'd be happy to explain why I believe this to be the case. But what we saw immediately afterwards were proponents of war putting out poorly sourced, unsourced in many cases, fantastical figures that sought to present the casualty toll as numbers exceeding even what the Nazis did in Babi Yar, for example, if these figures are to be believed. And in the context where Trump was being lobbied to go to war now on the pretext that he needs to put a stop to basically unprecedented mass murder. That was the justification for putting out these figures. Trump, in a sense, boxed himself in by claiming help is on the way and so on. And so now there's this campaign to present all these figures, that we're seeing something that really we haven't seen since the Nazi occupation of the Soviet Union or Poland during the Second World War. And that is also intended, I think, to help prepare public opinion for supporting the war. It's similar to, the babies in incubators story from 1990 in the run-up to the Kuwait War, the 40 beheaded babies, that, the non-existent pictures of the 40 beheaded babies that Biden repeatedly insisted he had seen, that helped prepare the ground for the Gaza genocide and so on.
Well,
and real quick, I just want to, real quick, I just want to also note to those, I'm sure many people who are watching the show are familiar, but when we're talking about the insane numbers that were being put out by these, so-called human rights organizations, when you noted you couldn't even find who was running them, we're talking 40,000.
Yeah, well, this
figures
specific case
were being thrown out.
Yes, this specific case that I wrote about concerns an organization based in Toronto, Canada, that goes by the name of International Center for Human Rights, and also seems to have links with another organization that, as far as I can tell, has no presence on the internet, called the International Center for Human Rights in Iran. You go to their website, you don't find any information about any member of staff, any member of its leadership, any board, or any member of the board. And it put out this report claiming that only on January 8th and 9th, the date on which the Iranian authorities imposed an internet blackout in the country, that on those 2 days alone, at least 43,000 Iranians were killed by the security forces, and at least 350,000 were wounded. Now, you read through this report, and they cite one unnamed anonymous source from the Iranian Health Administration. I presume that means the Ministry of Health. And they have a few other anonymous sources. I want to make clear, under such circumstances, I don't think there is anything objectionable in principle to consulting with anonymous sources, but they have to be verified, corroborated. It can't just be one. And the observation I made about this particular report, it is so poorly put together, and it is so clearly intended for propaganda purposes, that if a serious human rights organization had published it, it would no longer be considered serious. So, I mean, to give one example, it makes repeated references to the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court and violations of crimes defined by the ICC, without even bothering to note that Iran, like the United States, is not a signatory to the Rome Statute and is not a member of the International Criminal Court. And therefore, any crime committed by an Iranian citizen on Iranian soil cannot be brought before the ICC. I mean, this is kind of very elementary stuff that this purported human rights organization doesn't appear to be aware of.
Well, Munir, also, we have like this immediate barrage of media reports that you're referring to, and these human rights reports that have just been kind of pumped out in the past couple of weeks. But we're also seeing in some of these reports this framing about this, deep and sudden economic crisis that Iran is facing. Similar narratives to what we've seen in, used against Venezuela and Cuba, saying, oh, wow, there's just so much corruption. There's just so much corruption. And that's why there's this, sudden economic crisis that just appeared one day to the next. And this kind of decontextualizing and lack of explanation of actually how we got here, and, of course, distorting all sorts of things, is often left out. And so how is this current escalation and, the narrative about the economic crisis being spoken about? What elements are missing? Iran is, of course, the target of unilateral coercive measures by the United States, also UN sanctions, covert warfare, assassinations. So, what is this context that has been kind of removed to make it seem like the only logical step is for the US to somehow intervene and solve everything?
Well, I mean, the way the economic crisis in Iran is being presented in much of the mainstream media is kind of like, the way, let's say, the 2008 financial crisis or the Enron scandal in the United States are being presented, as if these are somehow endogenously generated crises that have absolutely no relation to what is happening outside. And of course, the context for the economic crisis is the decades of sanctions by the United States, by the Europeans, by the United Nations that Iran has been subjected to. I want to be clear, those who know Iran much better than I do confirm that there is widespread mismanagement and corruption in Iran, and that this is not solely the product of the sanctions regime, and that has added, of course, to the discontent among much of the Iranian population. But nevertheless, to present the economic crisis as something produced by the Iranian economy, by the Iranian leadership, as somehow leaving the sanctions unmentioned as the essential factor in which all of this is taking place is incredible irresponsibility. It's negligence. Because also what many Iranian specialists say is that it is precisely the sanctions regime that has enhanced the mismanagement and corruption that has left so many Iranians upset at the state of their country.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to like zoom out in a sense and recognize what this is really about. And so I'd like to ask, to what extent is this push towards confrontation really about Iran specifically as Iran and what it does internally versus, sending a broader message really to any state or movement that resists U.S. or Israeli regional dominance?
Let's be clear. Iran could slaughter 5 times as many people as have been reported killed, or even as have been claimed to be killed, if we take the highest estimates. And this would have absolutely no bearing on any U.S. decision to launch a war against Iran. Iran could be, according to Transparency International, it could be classified as the most corrupt country and mismanaged economy on earth by orders of magnitude for the next 75 years, and it wouldn't move a single U.S. aircraft carrier into the Middle East. This has absolutely nothing to do with Iranian domestic affairs, and it's quite clear. This is a campaign about, and I do think there are some differences here. I think the Americans would like to see Iran capitulate and do the US's bidding and fundamentally change its policies and so on. And they're perhaps less concerned about who is in charge in Tehran. Here, I think the analogy with Venezuela probably works quite well. And then you have the Israelis, for whom regime change even is insufficient. They want to see Iran fragmented, divided, weakened, incapable of defending itself against any future Israeli attacks on their territory. And I think that's really what's going on here. Now, problem is that Trump, as you know, has both a hawkish constituency and a non-interventionist constituency. And if you consider that the person at the summit of power in Washington is basically an empty vessel with a vacuum between his ears, the question then becomes which faction is going to succeed in pointing him in their direction. And I think what we've seen consistently is that the hawks and the Israel flunkies in the administration and in Trump's entourage are much more effective at getting Trump to adopt their agenda and their demands. So, we've gone from Iran basically renouncing enrichment, to renouncing a nuclear program, to having to give up its defense capabilities and missile program, to now becoming a paragon of human rights conduct. And what we see is that every time the U.S. or Trump tends to adopt the agenda of the most hawkish and pro-Israeli elements within his administration, and that is one reason why I suspect that war is not only inevitable but probably imminent as well.
Well, Mouin, it is certainly concerning to hear that, and it's this group, we had an image up before of Marco Rubio, J.D. Vance, Pete Hegseth, and Trump, and it's terrifying to think that the whims of these people with extreme right-wing pro-war tendencies are essentially dictating the fate of people across the world. But there is, of course, a connection here to be made with the domestic situation. U.S. presidents historically have used wars abroad as an attempt to distract and build up kind of national pride in some misguided and disgusting way. Do you see a link between what's happening now in the United States, growing internal unrest, and this drive towards war and these sort of wars of conquest that we've seen with Venezuela and now the threats and as you say, perhaps imminent attacks on Iran?
I mean, there's an argument to be made there, that that this is in one sense a distraction, but to the extent that I think that's a valid argument, it's very secondary. I think we need to see the foreign and domestic policies as essentially part of a single agenda, rather than, some people are claiming Iran is all about making us forget the Epstein files and so on. I don't buy that. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can divert without getting into what could be a prolonged and catastrophic war for the United States. So I think we need to understand, the nature of the regime in Washington, the kind of policies that it is adopting, and the agendas it has, both in terms of foreign policy and domestic policy, and see that these are very complementary. Now, it's certainly true, that foreign wars tend to enhance patriotic sentiment domestically and so on. But I think those are really secondary factors. If I could just make one related point to our earlier discussion, we talked about why are these fantastical casualty figures suddenly emerging, and I think they're for several reasons. I do think there are Iranians who have been cut off from family and friends in Iran, who are worried sick about what is happening in the country. And it's not unnatural that in such context they would fear the worst and give credence to these extremely high casualty figures. But when we're talking about people with political agendas, we're talking about, on the one hand, those who want to promote war with Iran, which of course will do much more damage to Iran's civilian population than what the government has been doing this month. And secondly, there is also an Israel-related agenda here, which, you have these people who have been basically trying to delegitimize and deny what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians during the Gaza genocide during the past 2+ years, and now trying to promote figures meant to prove that what is happening in Iran is so much worse than than what is happening in Gaza. But, let's suppose that everything these casualty figures are claiming is true. How does that in any way absolve Israel from what it is known to have done in Gaza? That would be my first point. My second point is that, quite curiously, just today, the Israeli military confirmed that the Gaza Health Ministry has in fact been the most credible and reliable source of data on Palestinian casualties, including Palestinian civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, from the very outset. And it's just been stunning to see the shameless way in which all these Israel flunkies, who have devoted themselves to undermining the credibility of the Gaza Health Ministry and undermining the reliability of its data for more than 2 years, have suddenly done this incredible pirouette and said, actually, what the Israeli military is now saying proves what we've been claiming all along. It's the equivalent of David Irving coming out and saying, I've been trying to convince you for decades that the Germans killed 6 million Jews during the Second World War. Will you now finally believe me it was a Holocaust? It's just the shamelessness is just simply breathtaking.
Yeah, you read my mind on that. I just saw that tweet before we started recording about the Israeli military saying, we accept these numbers. And it's just like, oh, okay. 2.5 years later. Mouin, I want to thank you so much for your work and thank you for joining us. Everyone should go check out your Substack. Your writing is incredible. It's always such a pleasure to hear your analysis, and hopefully
thank you very
back on
much.
soon.
I appreciate it. Pleasure being on your program.
Well, Zoe, we are going to continue with this horrific Iran escalation. I'm just going to go ahead and move to our next guest. We have with us the wonderful Hala, award-winning Beirut-based journalist. Though she's not in Beirut with me right now, but she will be soon, I hope.
Very soon.
Hala, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show.
It's lovely to be back. Thank you for asking me. And hi.
Well, let's just jump right into it. I mean, you see the news. It's insane what we're witnessing. This seemingly, imminent war with Iran. We're all just kind of waiting to see like which path Trump decides to take. It's not if, it's like when. I want to talk about your latest piece in Middle East Eye, where you warn that viral atrocity statistics and emotionally charged narratives about Iran are being weaponized as part of a march toward war. So, I mean, we were talking a bit with Mouin earlier about the numbers, but from your perspective, how are these numbers being used to shut down skepticism and emotionally prime Western audiences for escalation?
Well, I think it's important to say that my argument when I wrote that piece, my argument is very simple, that viral atrocity numbers are not just misinformation. They're political weapons. And as such, history has shown that they can be used, and they are often used to justify wars. This is not to say, by the way, that the numbers that the government have been saying or have produced are the final numbers or the results. For all we know, the numbers will be higher, maybe higher. This happens in crisis usually. But it's important when you're throwing such viral high numbers, extraordinary numbers, that you have also extraordinary evidence to back it up. And at this point in time, we don't have that 100% evidence that these numbers exist. Again, it's not denying that something is happening in Iran. It's not denying that there has been losses on both sides. It's just questioning and warning to be careful, because these numbers are proving to be dangerous for what is going to be happening in Iran. They are being turned into a pretext for what comes next to Iran.
Well, Hala, I think that's a great point to make, also because, statistics about violence justifying more violence doesn't add up either way. So, that's key to keep in mind, that we're not just talking about statistics and inflated statistics without real evidence being used to write reports, but it's actually being used to justify military intervention into a sovereign country. So,
we've seen that playbook before.
Right.
If we go back in history, we look at, for example, I'm going to go even to Kuwait, with the incubator story, for example, although that was not the trigger, but that was used as well. Or we go to Iraq and WMDs. Or we go recently to Venezuela, although different reasons, different elements, but however, there was a buildup about why. And then, at the end of the day, when the dust settled a little bit, it turned out nothing to do with that, but because, of oil and all sorts of other things, but we're not going to that. So the point is, if we acknowledge uncertainty, that does not give license to fabrication. So you cannot just make up numbers just because we're saying we're uncertain. However, we have to be responsible as well. And at the moment, again, given the blackout in Iran, given the fact that they had no internet, bless you, they had no. It's very hard for anyone to find or to be able to say, straightforward that these numbers are correct.
Right. And, you're a Lebanese-based journalist normally, and Beirut-based journalist normally. How is this moment being read regionally? And is there a sense that this is part of what may be a broader regional confrontation? What is the response from Gulf states been, who have expressed some rejection in some ways to military escalation in Iran? How is the region responding, and is there a sense that this could go beyond the borders of Iran?
Oh, absolutely, no question. I mean, everyone is concerned. Those that are, some of the Gulf countries that have rejected the idea or the prospect of the U.S. launching war against Iran, may not have done so because they're in love with Iran, or Iran is their greatest allies, but they're also looking out for their own interest, and they know that this could spill over, and the spillover is very damaging for everybody, not just for Iran. The bombs may drop in Iran, but the spillover is actually regional. And as far as places like, for example, Lebanon is concerned, within the Levant, yes, you have the if you want, those that are allied with Iran, such as Hezbollah and Iraq and not the Levant, and then Yemen. Everyone is concerned because, again, irrespective, whatever happens to Iran is going to have a spillover on them. For example, Lebanon at the moment is really under threat. I'll tell you why, even if it's not being spoken about, because whether true or not is another story, but there's a lot of, the mood is basically that if they go for Iran, Israel will have also an open hand to go for Lebanon before Iran in order to subdue Hezbollah, if you want, even further, in case they have any notion of supporting Iran when it's being attacked. So there are all these stories going around. So there is genuine fear. And yes, again, I say that the Gulf countries that are saying no to this are not necessarily Iran's best friends. And some of them have been foes of Iran in the past, but they are recognizing that this will not be contained in Iran. This is bigger than Iran. And yes, the region could be engulfed in something a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, and we're hearing that the Trump strategy, or Trump has like 3 options to choose from. One of them is more economic strangulation with like sort of military hardware to back it up. Another one is some sort of symbolic strikes against various representations of the IRGC. And then the most aggressive option that seems like it has an unfortunate likelihood to it would be this sort of regime decapitation attempt, where we don't know what that looks like, taking out the supreme leader, taking out senior leadership, something along those lines. But of course, I don't think any of that would stop there, like you said. And I want to actually zoom into places like Lebanon and Yemen in the sense of, Iran, as you know, Hala has had for a very long time this sort of forward defense strategy, right, where it has these partners in other countries in the region that, should any big war break out, the idea is that this would be like a deterrence to a bigger war breaking out because they join in. So when it comes to countries like Lebanon and Yemen, would Hezbollah, would the Houthis, do you think, become directly involved in a broader regional war, depending on how far the U.S. goes? I guess, what would that mean for these countries?
I think you just said it in your question, in the last few words that you mentioned. It depends on how far the U.S. will go. So let's put it this way. If the U.S. decides to take out the supreme leader, then yes, you are going to, there's no way, I can't see that Lebanon is going to stand down and do nothing. And when I say Lebanon, I don't mean obviously the entirety of Lebanon, as you know, but Hezbollah in Lebanon, and certainly not the Houthis either, and most likely not Iraqis either. If we're looking at, certain attacks, like you're saying, I mean, at the moment he used the word armada yesterday, that he's sending his second armada to the region, and showing, and showing force and saying, we're here, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. He may need, at the end of the day, not to walk away, because he needs to say, as we know, Trump as well, he needs to save face. So he may need to carry out some strikes, and yes, to hurt Iran a little bit. But the Iranians have already said that any strike, no matter how minimal they consider it, even if it's just a format, they are going to consider that as a war and respond very heavily. So Iran has already said that. As far as economic strangulation is concerned, then they're not there to hurt they're there to hurt the people, because as we know, again, at the very early on, everybody was going on about, the protesters and then the rioters, and they called them all protesters, whereas some of us have been trying to differentiate between protesters and rioters. But there is a reason for this, and there's a very legitimate reasons. Yes, they have economic hardship. Yes, there are problems internally in Iran. Yes, people are suffering. Yes, the currency has devalued, but we seem to forget sometimes that they've also been under sanctions for the last several few decades, and they have been strangled economically. Like, I think they might be the second or the third highest, with the highest number of sanctions laid on them after Russia. And the fact of the matter is that this is impacting the country, but it's impacting the people. It usually impacts the people, as we've always seen in other places. It's the people on the ground. It's the person on the ground that pays the price. So if he carries on more sanctions, if he tightens the noose further economically on Iran, again, it's the people that are going to suffer. Now, this might be what he wants to achieve, because the more they strangle Iran, the more the people suffer, and then perhaps the people, will rise up even further than what they have on this particular account. So that's another way of waging war economically, not by attacking it, but by actually delivering something in the country, which it's like a pressure cooker or a volcano, which is eventually going to erupt, and it's going to erupt against the government and bring it down internally. So any one of these factors. Now, economically, I don't think the Lebanese are going to interfere. I don't see Hezbollah interfering or going forth with this, unless, like I said, with the exception of if they actually go for the supreme leader. Then it's not just Lebanon. I think there are lots of Shiites around the world that have already said that is a taboo, not to be touched. So if that is going to cause, it's going to go beyond regional as well. It's going to cause problems where other Muslims and Shiites who look highly upon the supreme leader are going to be offended by it and take action.
Well, feels like Trump doesn't deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, to say the least. But
which one are we talking about?
Right,
who's Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, the one he was gifted, or the one that what's his name? Did you see that tweet with what's his name, Maher? Oh goodness, it was today that if he brings down Iran, having brought down Venezuela and one more, then he should be given the, what's his name, the American Maher, something Maher.
Oh, Bill Maher.
Bill Maher,
yeah,
Maher.
Yeah, she's mad. Bill Maher said this? What a psycho.
Yes,
Jesus
yes.
Christ. I'm not surprised at all.
It's gone mental, it's gone viral. I mean, he said that if he brings down Iran, having done Venezuela, and there's one more, I can't remember it, then he deserves, after bringing down these three countries, he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. So there you go. So that's why I said to you, which one? The one that's supposedly coming, according to this guy, or the one that was gifted to him?
Well, just two more wars and he gets this special one.
I know, but it's I mean, there's irony and there's humor and there's anecdotes in all of it. But it's quite worrying that we have this leader, president, these are his official titles, literally, taking everyone into an abyss that we don't know where it's going to end, where it starts and where it's going to end. And he wakes up every day with a new target, for whatever reason. I mean, and a lot of it is and I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of it is to do with Israel. I mean, it's basically trying to change the entire region, the face of the region, and to bring about a new world order according to them, not necessarily according to what's beneficial for the region or the people of the region. So taking everyone out, like Iran, if they take her out, that automatically impacts Hezbollah big time, impacts the Houthi, so you don't have an axis of resistance as such. So they've wiped out. It's all security for Israel, but no one is looking at security for others. And we've seen what happened in Syria. I mean, Syria should be a big example.
You would think, but people are still in denial that has just been an absolute disaster. But Hala, I wanted to ask you while we still have some time here, I wanted to ask you about Iraq, which is a country you've covered for a very long time. You covered the many wars on Iraq, in Iraq. And now what we see is Trump applying pressure over Iraq's potential new leadership, expressing opposition to the coordination framework's choice of Nouri al-Maliki for prime minister. He tweeted, either yesterday or the day before, saying that the U.S. would withhold help for Iraq if Nouri al-Maliki is the next prime minister. I'm curious how you interpret that interference. I was curious, where that came from. I didn't really think Trump understood Iraq at all. Is Iraq being positioned is this a part of another pressure point on Iraq as a wider strategy aimed at weakening Iran's regional alliances ahead of a possible war, or is something else going on here?
No, that is the main factor, because obviously they know that Iraq also, will not stand down if Iran is hugely attacked, or, as we said, if one of the main styles of attacks happen, whether it's supreme leader or a major military, not just precision, what they call precision targets, but they go full. Let's say they launch a full war on Iran that goes on and on and on and destroy it totally. Iraq is not going to stand still as others members of this axis of resistance. But so yes, he's pressuring them, but you have to remember, Iraq's money, the entirety of Iraq's money from oil is held in the US by the Americans. And Iraq, just what they said yesterday about Venezuela. So every month Iraq puts out what it requires, be it for, expenditure, salaries, civil servants, government, blah, blah. And they allow them that amount from their own oil revenue. Yeah. And that's what they were saying yesterday they wanted to do for Venezuela as well. So when you have your financial sovereignty in the hands of somebody else who's dictating how much and when and how, then they have the upper hand to actually pressure you. So when Trump said that yesterday, it was not just in jest. He was literally using that without spelling it out, that we can not help you. They can again go back to freezing the bank accounts and saying you're not getting the money. And again, who pays the price? Usually it's the person on the ground who's been having to shoulder this anyway for the last decade or what have you. So they're trying to pressure Iraq by having a go at Nouri Maliki as to whether he should or he can or he can't, or he should or he shouldn't. And by warning that if you do interfere in whatever manner, you will be penalized. And this is the one that we all see how they will be penalized is by freezing it's actually Iraqi money, but by preventing them from accessing their own oil revenues. So.
Well, gosh, this is just a disaster for everyone across the region, except, this little kleptocratic group of psychos I saw there was, according to Israel Hayom, the Jordanians and the UAE possibly have agreed to allow. You don't think it's true? What I was about to say? You're
what's
shaking
new?
Your head.
No, I'm shaking my head as in
what's new? Right.
I'm shaking my head.
Because of what I was saying.
Yeah, in dismay.
That the Israelis, they basically have said that they would allow. Right. No, you're absolutely right. But it's interesting because the UAE said just a couple days ago that they would not allow their airspace to be used to bomb Iran, but they have privately agreed to help the Israelis and Americans with whatever they need in terms of logistics. So it's just okay, you've just made yourself a target. But we'll see how it plays out. This is actually as dangerous as it's ever gotten. And Hala will be definitely looking to you for more analysis as the escalation continues. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. And thank you for inviting me. And if we don't talk before, I'll see you in Beirut.
Yes. Well,
nice to meet
Zoe, that brings us to the end of our show here. I do want to remind all of our viewers, if you haven't already, make sure you smash that like button, guys. It helps boost us in the algorithm that hates us. Smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to Breakthrough News on all social media platforms. And if you like us, if you want us to keep going and growing, throw money at us on patreon.com/breakthrough news. Become a member for as little as $5 a month, but there is no limit. So you can give more than that, and you can help sustain our independent reporting here at Breakthrough News, continuing to bring you truthful and honest reporting in this hellfire of a world that we're living in right now. Zoe, do you have any final words before we take off?
I mean, that was great analysis from Hala and Mouin. I mean, just a lot of really important information to keep in mind. And I think as we head into this weekend, which it sounds like escalation feels like pretty inevitable, I think really important to remember, especially both of them brought up the Kuwait story, Iraq, all of these lies that are peddled. I think just really important. Look to independent media, look to analysts in the region to understand what's happening, because we already know how the New York Times is going to frame this. We already know how CNN, Wall Street Journal are going to frame this, and it's not. Nobody wants war. I cannot believe that Trump ran on this anti-war platform and had his Secretary of Defense, God, I even forgot what the department was before. His Secretary of Defense changed his title to Secretary of War, and they still have the nerve to say that they are waging peace in the world. And war is not good for anyone. We all have to stand up against war and stand up against US escalation. And it's just it's a very unfortunate situation. And both, whether it's sanctions, whether it's hybrid war, whether it's direct military strikes, this does not help the Iranian people in any way. So if you take away one kernel of truth, it's that none of this is good for the Iranian people. So if this is done in the name of the Iranian people, it's not helpful. The US has no right to be the enforcer of people's access to their own resources, to hold hostage people's resources, to force them to just be complicit in others' attacks. It's just really bleak. But we're going to try to bring up that revolutionary optimism and remember that people are fighting back and people are resisting. And we're so lucky that we had these incredible analysts to really break it down for us and remind us and understand what's really at stake here.
Well said, Zoe. And gosh, this weekend is going to be interesting to watch. Like, we're literally just waiting for how the US is going to strike Iran, not if they strike Iran. It's just nuts. But all that's to say, don't forget, tomorrow is a big shut it down, right, across the nation. Lots of actions planned. We will be bringing you information about those actions at Breakthrough News. Make sure you're following us here on YouTube and on all our social media platforms. We are there on the ground. We're everywhere, guys. So patreon.com/breakthrough news. Help us make it happen. And that's it for today, everybody. Thanks you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.